Good morning. Today is March the 3rd, 2016, here at Washington Family Church. Our reading today is the subtopic, We Are the Mediators Between the Kingdom on Earth and the Kingdom in Heaven. Page 697. 11. In the process of creation, God made all things and made humankind. Everything began with God as at the center. God's will was for oneness between himself and all people, and for equilibrium for all things in the creation. We human beings stand in the middle between God and the created world. Thus, we can function as the mediators between the spiritual and physical worlds. 12. There is no doubt that God's creation of heaven and earth was glorious. First, he created the substantial spiritual world. Then, he created the substantial physical world as a representation of the spirit world. Finally, he created Adam and Eve as the central embodiment of the physical world and spiritual world. Adam and Eve were destined to move together in rhythm with heaven and earth. The necessary implication was that if Adam and Eve changed, heaven and earth also would change. And if Adam and Eve's center were broken up, the center of the entire universe would break up. And if the center of the entire universe were to break up, the center of the Creator also would break up. 13. There is a reason God created human beings as two separate entities, man and woman. First, God exists as the subject partner with harmonized dual characteristics, but because he has no external form, he needed a form through which he could relate to the substantial world. Since the creation includes a physical world, God absolutely needed a body that would enable him to communicate with or act freely in that world. It could not just be the body of the man or the body of the woman. It had to be the bodies of both Adam and Eve, together reflecting the image of God. Without form, God is limited in the ability to relate with the corporeal, substantial world. Accordingly, if Adam and Eve had become one while attending God, and if after becoming perfect, they had married and given birth to children, they would have become the external, horizontal, substantial, true parents, while God would have become the internal, vertical, substantial, true parent. If this had happened, Adam and Eve would have stood in God's position and resembled God 100%, both internally and externally. And if Adam and Eve, resembling God completely, had become the true parents of humanity, all humanity would have come to recognize them as God's substantial form. Second, God created human beings as separate entities, man and woman, for the perfection of love. When Adam and Eve become the perfected substantial forms of love and achieve complete oneness, God intended to dwell within them and become the parent of the true love for all humankind. Adam and Eve, who thus would have stood in the position of God's external form, then would have been able to reproduce children and form an ideal family and an ideal world. Once this happened, the spirit world and the earthly realm would have been connected through humankind. Number 14 on page 699. God has no external form. He is invisible. Even in the spirit world, God cannot be seen. Nonetheless, God needs a body. God created all things because he needs an object partner. Through it, he can assume a physical form. Perfected Adam and Eve were to have become God's body. So originally, when they went to the spirit world, Adam and Eve were to have become the king and queen of the family, tribe, people, nation, and world, and of the cosmos. Thus, in the spirit world, they would have represented God. 15. God's vision of the ideal of creation included the kingdom of heaven in the spirit world, but he created all things because he wished for a concrete kingdom of heaven in the physical world where he personally could reside. In other words, God created the world and everything in it to experience the glory of both the spiritual and physical kingdom of heaven with himself and Adam and Eve as the center. He did not plan on establishing the kingdom of heaven in heaven and on earth just for himself. He created them for humankind as well. God's purpose for creating heaven and earth was so that human beings could live in the kingdom of heaven on earth, and afterward in the eternal world of the kingdom of heaven in heaven, centering on Adam and Eve. 16. What kind of people can live in the kingdom of heaven on earth? What kind of spirits can live in the infinite spirit world, the kingdom of heaven in heaven? People that have received the love of Jesus and the Holy Spirit on earth, and going beyond that, receive the love of the Father directly, live together with him and become the victors of harmony based on the ideal of love. Only they can live in that kingdom. So the kingdom of heaven is to be established first on earth. Number 17. According to God's principle of creation, the kingdom of heaven must be perfected first in this earthly world. Originally, God created us such that after living in the kingdom of heaven on earth while in the flesh, we naturally would discard our physical body, move to the kingdom of heaven in the spirit world, and live eternally. Then what should the kingdom of heaven which we need to construct on earth look like? The original family in the kingdom of heaven have the same structure. Basically, in a family, there are the original parents, the original husband and wife, the original children, and the original brothers and sisters. When this family becomes one centered on true love, harmony and unity come about automatically. On that foundation, with true love, true life, and true lineage woven together, they can take on an even higher purpose. 18. If human beings had not fallen, they would have become the perfected true children of God, with God as their parent and his true love at the center of their lives. Perfected human beings were to form the bond of true husband and wife, surrounded by God's love. Give birth to and raise true children. We're now on page 700. Together, they were to establish the kingdom of heaven on earth and live together there. And then, with their entire family, they would one day live in the kingdom of heaven in heaven. If your father went to hell and your mother went to heaven, how could she feel it was the kingdom of heaven? If the parents went to hell and only the children entered heaven, how could anyone call that kingdom of heaven? The kingdom of heaven is a place where the family enters together and lives in an internal, real realm of peace. Accordingly, God can settle his ideal of creation only where heaven has seen made real in a family on earth. This is where God longs to dwell. Number 19, you must realize that you absolutely need your grandfather and grandmother, father and mother, husband or wife and children. Those four stages encompass all of humanity. Then you have to love your nation more than you love your family, and love the world more than your nation. To live in a spirit world which brings together the past, present, future, you need to practice such love. The kingdom of heaven on earth is established here on earth, and the kingdom of heaven on earth creates the kingdom of heaven in heaven automatically. It is a place where people who have practiced the four stages of love can go. 20. If the first ancestors had not fallen or sinned, but instead had conformed to the will of God, God could have rejoiced when they died. Would they have had any regrets? If you have lived without bitter anguish, if you have been able to rejoice and offer a praise before God, and if God himself is happy with you, then upon death you will be in the kingdom of heaven. He created. That is the kingdom of heaven of God's original intention. People with deep bitterness are not meant to go to the kingdom of heaven. You cannot enter the kingdom of heaven while in torment. 21. The kingdom of heaven that God desires is not established only in the spirit world. The kingdom of heaven of God desires is established first on earth and then in the spiritual world. The spirit world is populated by the spirits of people who have passed on. The world and this earthly world cannot remain separated. To possess a victorious, substantial self and to embody heaven's ideology, you need to uphold both heavenly ethics and human ethics. You need to live the ideology of kingdom of heaven in your daily life. Then you would be in accord with both heaven and human ethics. That should be the kingdom of heaven for individuals and at the same time for the family, society, nation, world, and cosmos. We're now on page 701. Your very being should manifest the ideology of the kingdom of heaven. 22. As the incorporeal subject partner, God longed for an object partner who could provide the universal stimulation of love in history, for which he had yearned since the beginning of time. How great that stimulation will be when he encounters men and women who have become perfect object partners, both corporeal and incorporeal. God created Adam and Eve on earth because the kingdom of heaven is to be established first on earth. After they live in the ideal life on earth, their spirits are to dwell in the eternal kingdom of heaven in heaven. 23. At your home, please take care of nature so as to make a good environment. A person who has given his or her best for this would have a proportional right of ownership in the next world, the kingdom of heaven, which is hundreds of times bigger than this one. You attain this stature on earth. Do you want to be well off there? Or would you rather find yourself in a room in the spirit world just big enough for you to touch your forehead and look at each other's faces. You should live in such a way that you will be able to fly, dance, sing, and go wherever you please, seeking out hundreds and thousands of places. What is the most desolate place in the world? If you go to such a place and find that the soil is barren, you should want to make that place green by yourself. Even it means you have to invest precious resources from your own country. You should at least set a model standard, as does Manmul Peak or on Mount Gumgang. The time has now come to make many things, even after having done so, establish a beautiful kingdom of heaven remains for us to fulfill in our lives. We need to become the owners, creating an environment where we can live in joy. That ends our Hunduke, and tomorrow we will read about the nature of the spirit world. Here's the book, and this is the topic we'll be reading tomorrow: the nature of the spiritual world. So have a great and wonderful Thursday. Manse, mabuhay. And keep yourself warm. It's getting colder again. There might be wet snow today. My name is Athanansius Francis Catalan. I am reading from the Washington Family Church here in Washington, D.C., USA.